extent. However, if you go to your doctor and your doctor tells you, you're in the beginning stages of lung cancer, you can't just say, well, okay, well, I'll just follow my mom's advice and ignore it and it will go away. No, if you ignore cancer, it does not go away. It metastasizes, it spreads and consumes the body, and then eventually you go away. So at the first sign of cancer, you must address it immediately to at best eradicate it, to at the very least put it into remission. And folks, any kind of supremacy is a cancer, okay? It's not the common headache or bellyache or elementary school bully. We must address these things and not ignore them. And this is why I'm so happy to see so many people here today, being interested in this kind of work. No matter who leads this country, who is in the White House at any given time, they're only there for a minimum of 4 years, at a maximum of 8 years. But we are going to be around for a long time. And we are putting this together ourselves. And let me tell each and every one of you who thinks, well, what can I do as an individual? I'm an individual. TM, Jeff, all these people here, Anne is an individual. Look at this great organization she has put together on her own. Let me point out Martin Luther King, for example. All right, we had a problem with a bus company called the Montgomery Bus Lines in Montgomery, Alabama, that were not treating Black riders properly, making them sit in the back, dragging them by the leg up the street when they tried to get in the bus. You got on the bus in the front if you were Black. You got on in the front, you put your token in, and then you had to get back off the bus, walk down the sidewalk, and get in the back door. You could not walk down the middle of the bus like white people. And oftentimes the guy who was the bus driver, his name was James Blake. James Blake would pull the handle and close the door on Black men's legs and drag them up the street. And this has been going on for a while. So Martin Luther King himself put together that bus boycott. It took a year before the bus lines changed, and they changed because they were riding around empty. The majority of people riding the Montgomery bus lines were Black people. They didn't have cars. They couldn't afford cars. And they had to go out to the suburbs to work for white people as domestics. But that boycott that he put together with his team took about a year, and finally the Montgomery bus lines changed and said, okay, fine, you all can sit wherever you want to sit, no problem. And when that happened, all the other Southern states followed suit without Martin Luther King going there, because they figured, you know what? He succeeded there. He's going to come here next. They went ahead and changed. This was the idea of one man and put together by a team. So that is the power of individuals. And everyone on this call has that same power. Jeff has it. He put together Beyond Barriers. TM has it. Put together, Be the Change. All right. And I'm a strong believer in, you know what? I don't like having enemies. I don't like having enemies. So you know how I vanquish my enemies? I make them my friends. And I have acquired many, many great friends out of white supremacists or just racists in general. People, even some of my Black detractors who called me an Uncle Tom, an Oreo, a sellout, etc. Some of them have come back to me because now they understand what I'm doing. Not all of them, but everybody has something to contribute. And as Ann pointed out, we all are human beings. I have been, there are 195 countries in the world. I've been to 57 of them. I know people who've been to 125. I met a guy yesterday who'd been to 160. So I'm way behind in terms of that. But I can tell you something, no matter how far I've gone from this country, our country, the United States, whether it's right next door to Canada or whether it's to Mexico or halfway around the globe, no matter how different the people may be who I encounter, they may not look like me, they may not speak like me, worship as I do, practice the culture which I practice, or believe in what I believe. No matter how different they may be, when I get back home, I always conclude one thing, and that is we all are human beings. And as such, We all want the same basic 5 things in our lives. We all want to be loved. We all want to be respected. We all want to be heard. We all want to be treated fairly. And we all want the same things for our family as anybody else wants for their family. And I will guarantee you, no matter what your station is in life, if you employ some of these 5 core values I just named in whatever culture or in whatever society you may find yourself in which you are unfamiliar, I will guarantee your navigation will be much more smooth and much more positive. Not everybody's going to change, but that's where it starts, on how we treat people. And, you know, one's perception, you've heard this a million times, but let me explain it to you. One's perception is one's reality. You cannot change somebody's reality. Their reality is their reality, whether it's real or not. It's their reality. And the more you attack it and try to change it and try to point out what's wrong with it, even though you're doing, you know, you're telling the truth, you're not going to change their reality, because they know what they know. You know, they're not going to know what they don't know. All right. But what you do is this: rather than go that route, offer them another perception. Offer them several different perceptions that you feel are better than the one that they have turned into their reality. Because if they resonate with one of the perceptions that you provide, they will then change their own reality, because one's perception is one's reality. It works with children, it works with adults alike. I'll give you 2 quick examples, and then I'm going to turn it over to TM. For example, here's a hypothetical one. All right, you have a 7 or 8 year old brother, and he goes to a magic show with his class from school, and he comes back and tells you that this magician on stage, you know, asked for a female volunteer, and 50 women raised their hands, and one of them, you know, he picked one of them out of the audience, and she trotted up on stage, and he asked her name and where she's from, and then asked her to climb into this long box and stick her feet out that side and stick her head out this side. And so she did, and he closes the lid, and then he took a chainsaw and cut that box in half. To that 7 or 8 year old kid, he just witnessed a man saw a woman in half. And to make it even more real, then the magician separated the 2 halves. He put the half with the legs sticking out on stage left, put the half with the head sticking out on stage right. So now half the woman is on one side of the stage, and the other half is on the other side of the stage. And then to make it more real, he walked over to the head and started talking to it. And the head talked back to him. And then he brought the 2 halves back together, opened the box, and she climbed out in full form. No blood, nothing. To that 7 or 8 year old child, that man just performed magic. And when you try to tell him, well, yeah, you know, that really wasn't the case. You know, it's an illusion that he created. No, I saw it. I saw him cut her in half. And the more you try to tell him it wasn't real, the more he's going to come down on you, because he knows what he saw. It is his reality. One's perception is one's reality. So if you're attacking his reality, you are wasting your time. What you do is you might say, well, you know, is it possible that the woman he picked out of the audience, maybe she works for him? Maybe he planted her in that particular seat and she travels around the country with him to all his shows, and she's always picked, and she knows the trick. She gets in the box. Already in the floor of the box are some mannequin legs, some dummy legs, and she just takes them. They look like her legs and are wearing the same shoes that she's wearing, and she sticks them out the holes of the box, and then she brings her own knees up under her chest, so her whole body is on that half of the box. And then when he separates the 2 halves, her whole body has gone over to stage right. So then when he brings it back together, she pulls those mannequin legs out and leaves them in the box, and she climbs out full form. No blood, nothing. So the kid thinks, I guess that is the only way that could work. And so now you've offered him a better perception, and he changes his own reality. So even though in the media, when my name is Googled, it often says, Black musician converts X number of KKK or whatever, that is false. I did not convert anybody, not even one person. I simply offered over 200 people different perceptions, and they simply resonated with that. They converted themselves. It's always stronger when somebody arrives at their own conclusion, I need to do this, rather than you tell them you need to do that. All right. So when you give them something and they come to the conclusion that this is a better path for me, that will hold a lot stronger and a lot longer than you trying to compel somebody to do something. So let's offer better perceptions to people and humanize them. We all are human beings, and we all want those same things. The second, okay, I just gave you a hypothetical, real quick, one for real. This Klansman was murdered, and I knew him very, very well, and I knew the murderer as well, and we all did. And I went to this person's funeral, and I participated in the funeral for this Klansman. He had two funerals, one for the public and one private one for the Klan. And the Klan invited me also to the private one, so I attended both because they knew how much he got along with me, et cetera, and they respected that. And I told them, when you surround yourself with hate, it's going to come back and bite you in the butt. And it may not come from the same person that you hated upon, but karma has a way of working, and it may come back from somebody least likely, and that's exactly what happened. It wasn't a Black person who killed this Klansman or a rival Klansman. It was somebody from within. And anyway, I met his parents at the funeral. I didn't know his parents, and his parents were not involved whatsoever with white supremacy or the Klan or anything like that. And they were disappointed that their kid was, well, he's an adult, but their child was participating in this kind of thing. And they did not agree with it, but they loved their son. And anyway, I became close to the parents. And one day I was sitting here in my living room shortly after the funeral, and the father called me, and he was crying, and he had a gun. And he told me he was going to kill the person who murdered his son. And I knew that, people make decisions we're wired to make decisions either by logic or by emotion. And just like, we're wired to be left-handed or right-handed. It doesn't mean that we don't, if we're wired predominantly for emotion, doesn't mean that we don't use logic. It just means that we predominantly use emotion, or vice versa. If we're wired more for emotion, it doesn't mean, if we're wired more for logic, doesn't mean we don't use emotion. We just predominantly use, logic. So if you're going to argue with somebody who is a scientist or something like that, or a lawyer, an emotional argument is not going to work. Those people are wired for logic. They want to see the stats, the data, the evidence. You can't tell them about what you feel. They want to see what the numbers show and all the concrete evidence. If you're having an argument with somebody who's wired for emotion, you cannot provide them data. You got to provide a better emotional perspective or perception, and that will resonate with them. So this guy, he was acting upon emotion when he wanted to go and kill this person who murdered his son. And I knew, telling him logically, hey man, if you do that, you're going to get 25 to 40 years in prison. You're already old, so you're going to die in prison. That would not have resonated with him. Those numbers don't mean anything. This person took the life of his son, his only son, and he has two daughters, and he took his only son. So a logical argument is not going to work. So I appealed to an emotional side of him. I changed his perception. I said, listen, you've already lost your son. Nothing is going to bring him back. What you need to do is consider you have two other children. And of course, they're adults as well, too. I said, you don't want to lose your daughters. But if you go and kill this person, you are going to lose both your daughters, because you will then be imprisoned and you will not be able to see them. And you have no control over where they send you, because prisoners move around the country all the time. And oftentimes they move these prisoners intentionally to the other side of the country from where you grew up, to make it hard on your family. That's part of your punishment. So now you're going to lose your daughters. So that emotion that He lost his son and he's about to lose his daughters, is what stopped him from going and killing the murderer. So I didn't tell him what to do and what not to do. I just told him what the consequences were. One appeal was logical, one was emotional. I use the emotional because that's where he was. And that's, these are the kinds of things that we need to focus on. Meet somebody where they are. Meet them where they are. Remember, they're human beings. We all have been in these positions. And together, everybody on this call can do something. I realize many of you may not want to go to a neo-Nazi rally or to a Klan rally or whatever. And that's fine, okay? You don't have to be on the front line. You can be on the back line. You can be on the sideline. You can be online, but be doing something to support each other, because we together can be a team. We individually can be very effective, as I just pointed out, but together there is no stopping us. We need people on the sideline. We need them on the front line. We need them on the back line. So pick your line and help us out. And I just want to point out one thing. Anne mentioned my book. Clandestine Relationships was my first book. It is already out. It's out of print now, but the second book is called The Klan Whisperer, and it's not quite out yet. I just finished it during the pandemic, so the agent is pitching it currently. And when it comes out, I'll definitely let Anne know. Thank you very much, and TM, I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
Okay, thank you, Daryl. And thank you for reminding everyone that we each have a part. And I'd like to say last time when we got talking, and TM does a lot of work on tattoo removal as well, which I hope you'll talk about. And as a point of intervention, last time when Sean talked about how painful it was for him to have marks of hate on his body and try to re-enter society, someone sent a donation for tattoo removal, which we turned immediately to one of TM's contacts, because Sean has someone that's offered him free tattoo removal. And TM's doing amazing work in that area. So there's different points of intervention. But anyway, I don't want to take your time, TM. Go ahead and speak.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for organizing this. Thank you for having us three here today. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Daryl, for participating. Thank you, Daryl, for destroying my childhood memories of magic. No, just kidding. As you all said, Daryl said it, white supremacy, hatred, racism, it's a cancer. But the important part when we talk about this, and Jeff has mentioned it, Anne has mentioned it, Daryl has mentioned it, the cancer is the ideology that those people have. It's not the people themselves. And this is what we do very, very easily. And you probably can relate to that as well. It's always easy to hate or dislike somebody, but it's hard to love. It's much harder to love, especially those that you don't like. And if you see somebody who believes different and whatever, and does things that you don't like, you always put that on the human being as well. You project that on the human being itself as a human being, which we shouldn't do. But we can talk about this in a minute. But this is very important to differ between the ideology and the human being itself. Because if we don't do that, we take that humanity away and only see an enemy, an evil, and we're the good, and we have to fight that evil. And that can lead to horrible, horrible consequences and events. Dehumanization led to the fact that a whole population actually supported a genocide in Europe that happened in the 1940s in Germany. Because if you ask yourself how Germans could participate in that and everybody following or ignoring or looking away when 6 million Jews and a lot of other people were murdered in the Holocaust, it was because of dehumanization. And humanization is a big, big part of our de-radicalization process, our exit work. So I'm originally from Germany, born and raised there. That's where my funny accent comes from. And Anne mentioned it too. 2 of the oldest exit programs come from Europe. The oldest one from Sweden and the second oldest one from Germany. That is Exit Germany, which I'm very, very proud that I work with them. They were my first point of contact more than 10 years after I got out. And you see how important it is sometimes much, much later. And they have such a profound knowledge and statistics. And whenever I have a question, I can on WhatsApp, and I send a message and I will get my answer back. I need help, I need a number, I need anything. They're there, and that is really, really, really great. So how does that intervention work? How does exit work? And you see, there's different approaches. Like Jeff said, usually people come themselves, reach out, because we are very prominent out there. We're in the media. People know about us. They see us in interviews like this, for example. This is why these events are so important as well, because those people are watching these videos as well, or in the newspaper, or on TV, or whatever. They see that and they see, man, I may have had a doubt, but who wants to talk to a neo-Nazi? Who wants to talk to a Klansman? The horrible people, right? With these horrible ideologies. But again, we're talking about the ideology. They're still a human being. So in that case, they know that people like Jeff and I will talk to them. They also know that Daryl will talk to them. The difference is Daryl goes out and he may pick up the phone, calls a Klansman and says, hey, I want to meet up with you. For the children out there, don't do that at home. That's what I always say. Daryl is indestructible. He's a hero, really. He's my hero. For the regular person, don't do that. You can do that. Daryl calls it, by the way, walk across the cafeteria. If somebody thinks different, believes different, even votes different nowadays, walk across the cafeteria, just sit down with them, discover what you have in common. Just a regular person, your neighbor. Maybe learn their name again that you forgot because you started dehumanizing them because they didn't vote for the same person that you did. These small things that we witness here in this country right now, and you see it all over Europe as well, are just small examples for what happens in white supremacy as well. So I call them trigger moments. And people have a trigger moment, they have a doubt, and they think, maybe it's not right what I'm doing, or something that happened in your organization, something that you saw on the news, some event that happened that you don't agree with. Well, who are you going to talk to? So when they know about us, they come to us and we start talking. And first, it's a lot of talking, sometimes online, texting, sometimes on Facebook, sometimes it's just a phone number and I have no idea where the person's from. I know around Nashville, and then I have to dig where they come from, what they're telling me. And a lot of that, like Jeff said, is listening. And Daryl does the same. It's a lot of listening. Respect them as a human being. Make no mistake, and make sure that they know that you don't agree with them politically, but make sure they know you know that they're humans, that they're human beings. They will lower the barriers and they will give that back to you at some point. At some point, usually there comes a personal meeting, and you're going to meet with them at a safe place. And you start deradicalizing them with giving them other perspectives. And like Daryl said, telling them to change, telling them to believe in something that might work for a certain amount of time, but it doesn't stick around. They need to come to the conclusion themselves. This only works if you give them these perspectives. And what I am doing at a certain point when I know it's sort of safe is giving them a very special perspective. I bring them together with the minorities, mostly with the people they used to hate. They used to hate the most, depending what it was. Muslims, Jews, Black people, transgender people, whatever it was, we bring them together. And my contacts in these communities know what I'm doing. They know who I'm bringing. It's mostly judgment-free. Of course, they will start picking that person's brain that I'm bringing, of course. But there will be no judgment. They know that person may have put a KKK hood over their head last month or last year. They may still have that swastika tattoo. I will talk about that in just a second too, on their head or neck or whatever. And still I bring them into the Black community, Jewish community, or wherever. And we can talk. And then you learn that these people are just human beings, You like the same things, you worry the same about your family, your children, and so on and so on. You discover you have much more in common than what's different. And this is my approach. It's a very practical approach. After we work on the de-radicalization just through talking, then I start the practical approach. It's not always easy because it always costs, because you need to travel, you need to bring them or whatever. So it's always very selective with people that are far enough. Not talking about this tattoo that I mentioned. And tattoos are very, very important in that movement because it identifies you. It sometimes even on purpose in gangs, prison gangs, for example, they want to have you those tattoos because you just can't go away with those tattoos. You belong to them. And the crazy thing is, people in that movement are happily and willingly, they want these tattoos and they bind themselves to these organizations, to that ideology so visibly without thinking about the consequences, what happens in 10 or 20 years. Well, sometimes in 10 or 20 years, you change your mind because you talk to Daryl, to Jeff, to TM, and you start realizing, maybe it's not the right thing that I'm doing. And then you enter this old world, you'll be a traitor to them in that movement. Or if you leave ISIS or whatever, or a gang, you will be a traitor. It's very hard or mostly impossible to go back. And you have this new world. World behind you, they don't want you. This new world, and you're pretty sure they don't want you either. Because who talks to a Nazi? Who wants the horrible people, right? That's what most people think. And on top of that, you have these tattoos. And again, then you want therapy. You realize, man, I need therapy for that. Then you go to a counselor. Like Anne said, the counselor might be Jewish, and you pop up there with a swastika on your face. Right? Then you try to get a job. You may have done some courses and whatever, and some education, and you have a nice resume finally after 3 years being out. You put that resume down, and your job recruiter looks at your swastika on your face, right? They will forget about your resume. Who wants the Nazi? Who cares if that person is out for 3 years? You don't even ask that far because it's very visible. Swastika, you must be a Nazi. And that is very painful. And you are actually set to fail in the society with these tattoos if nobody takes care of that. And people sometimes even go back because what are you gonna do? I've seen people go back after 2 or 3 years, and that was very tricky. So I had the same thing. I had tattoos myself, fortunately swastikas, but other tattoos that identified me as a member of these groups. And it was very tricky navigating in society. The ones that were most visible or most identifying, I covered up with duct tape. I covered it up with Sharpies when I went to the lake. And I will give you one quick story to understand what personal trauma it gives you too. So I was out already for about 2 or 3 years, and I went to a water park with my children. I had my child on the hand, and we went up like whatever it was. I remember a Turkish Muslim woman with her child was standing in front of me on the ladder, and she was turning around, looking at me, and I had a tattoo saying the word skinhead. And yeah, skinheads, well, the horrible people, right? And they kill immigrants, and they're violent and everything. And that woman looked at me with fear in her eyes, and I was standing there, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted to tell her, I'm not like that anymore. Don't be afraid. But I was like paralyzed, and that caused sort of a trauma, and I started covering up. Again, Sharpies, duct tape, and whatever. And then I said, okay, I need to get rid of that. That was the first one. And it was hard. I went to a tattoo shop. There was a lot of judgment. You never know. Is that a right-wing person who judges you because you want to get rid of it? Or is it a left-wing person who judges you because you have it in the first place? And then you don't know what you're going to get, because when you come to a tattoo shop and you say, and there's a difference between laser treatment where it disappears, and that is very, very expensive, or covering it up with a new tattoo, which is much cheaper, but it needs some creativity. But when you're the person having it, you don't have that creativity. Instead of creativity, you just have that anxiety. Make it go away. You know, it's imagine somebody brings a picture to a painter and says, make it go away. The painter wants you to know what you want to have. And that's the same with the tattoo artist. They often don't have the psychological background or even the empathy to understand what you're saying when you say, make it go away. They don't understand your pain. And it took me a while to find a tattoo shop that actually happened here in the US. They covered up my last tattoo, who understood my pain and resonated with that and said, well, that is great. And we became friends. I was in 2013, like 10 years after I got out. I got rid of my last tattoo that I had from the movement. We became friends. I started working with the shop, just without some other things. And in 2017, around the time when Charlottesville happened, of course, people reached out more and more to me because that's the time when I became very, very active. I found a change in 2016 and started developing all these programs. I didn't even plan doing that. It just happened because people started reaching out and I didn't know what to do with them. So I had the feeling I need to help them. And with the help of Exit Germany, I was able to build up my Exit program because I just felt the need to do this. And the tattoos were one big thing that always popped up again. Everybody who came here in the US, everybody had some sort of tattoo that caused them some sort of trauma and problems to navigate in the society. So I asked my friends at the tattoo shop, what do you actually think about if we come up with a campaign where we cover them up for free? Of course, there's some vetting involved. We have to make sure those people are not abusing us because they have a trial coming up and the judge may want to see that disappear. But in general, we're trying to I'm thinking, okay, I think I'm back. 1 second.
You're here. Well, you were here.
1 second.
Is it an intervention? He's getting a call. Okay, well, TM figures out.
No, I'm good. I'm good. That happens. My mother was just calling WhatsApp, and I couldn't click her away. I need to call her back then. But that is fine. We're good.
Mother.
So, I had to come up with a program to help those people because they had the same pain that I had and the same problems. And the tattoo shop was immediately they were on it. They were like, yeah, let's do it. We involved also gang tattoos and anything. Gang tattoos, extremist tattoos, hate tattoos, racist tattoos. And of course, newspaper picked it up, TV picked it up, and it was out there. And a lot of other tattoo shops that saw that picked it up as well. So thought, this is great. We got to do this. And there's great tattoo shops. You can Google them. One person, a good friend of mine in Ohio, Billy White, you can Google him. He's a tattoo artist. And he started about the same time. And we did a lot together. It is amazing. And especially how that relieving feeling for those people when they get rid of those tattoos and finally can be a productive member of the society again and actually can start navigating. Go to a store without being looked on, Go to the beach, take your shirt off. Maybe having a child that's now 5, not 3 anymore, 5, 6 years old, they start asking questions. Daddy, what is this? This is all very painful. Or the Turkish woman that I had in front of me, that looked back and that fear in her eyes, that we can actually really help those people with a trauma. And it gives them a chance. And it helps them also in that de-radicalization process because they look in the mirror and what they see first is a human being, not a swastika anymore. And that's what I'm doing with all these approaches. So some are similar to Daryl, some are similar to Jeff's, but I add a lot to that with my practical approaches.
Thank you, TM. I have about 50 questions that I want to ask. So I'm just going to throw some of them out there and you can decide whether you want to ask them. And then we have some questions in chat. But this whole idea of, I know, Jeff, sometimes people call you because they really respected you in the movement and they want your opinion like, oh, why would you have left? And I know that some of the people in your movement, and I think, TM, some that you referred for interviews, ended up finding in DNA that they had Indian blood, that they had ethnicities that they used to hate. One guy found he had Jewish roots. And also, TM, you referred somebody that had Aryan nations over his face and swastikas on his head. And poor guy said people were attacking him in the car. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, if these people came to me as the therapist, if I'm following normal therapeutic ways of dealing with people, I have an hour. And, these are like huge things to figure out. And we know from our research on ISIS, and I think it's the same with white supremacism, that people join groups to meet their needs. they think that this group is going to meet their needs. And what I find is they need a group to belong to. They need to feel some significance. Maybe they need a sense of safety. And Daryl, you talked about redirecting people to new perceptions that convince them maybe this will work for me, so they take it in themselves. And you redirect them so they make it themselves instead of you scolding them, this is wrong. So I'd love to hear more on that from all of you. And I'd also like to hear how you deal with trauma, because I know as a PTSD expert that traumatized people are often in an alarm state. So they have trauma from childhood, then they have trauma from the violence in the group, and they're not sure, should I continue glorifying this trauma, this violence, and think it's a good thing, but I'm having nightmares about it. And how do you deal with that? And I know that having a positive attachment can help to heal some of the alienation, can help to make people feel safe, can direct them out of the movement. But Jeff, I know you've talked to me other times about people lose all their friends. TM, you and I have talked about Exit Germany a lot of times tells people, break all your contacts. Don't have anything to do with these people. But what does a person do that joined a group because they needed belonging? What do they do now? And if they came to me, they'd see me 1 hour a week. So do they need to call you every day? Do they need you to be their new best friend for a time? I know I'm just rattling out questions. And then we have 2 questions about, is it more difficult to disengage in rural locations? And are there regional differences? And then we have another question, about, this is for Daryl, about someone after Biden's inauguration flew his United States flag upside down. And the husband wanted to go and talk to them and wasn't sure if it was a good thing or not, but they were thinking there was some extremism going on in that house and that it's a military person that also flies a Navy flag. What should they do? So tons of questions. And why don't we open it for Jeff again and just go down the line? And I know you don't have all the answers, but I also know that you're, all 3 of you, very creative. And maybe you could tell us some success story in an intervention, and also somebody you lost, you know, somebody that contacted and then just disappeared. And is there things that we can do so we don't lose people? So,
yeah, I'd definitely be able to answer that. We won't get into any names or anything for privacy reasons, but there's one particular case that we have, and this was, as you all know, I was involved 27 years total. This was an individual that was involved since the 1980s. I mean, he went back 37 years. He was in the Klan, then he was in the NSM. And he had contacted me within the last year since we started Beyond Barriers and had heard about the work that we're doing. And first it started with emails, and then it was phone calls and texts and things. And it was every time I was talking to him, he said, believe me, I'm out, Jeff, believe me, you know, and I wasn't questioning him, but he was just had that fear that no one would ever believe that he was anything but he was what he was before. And everyone has those moments, you know, so a lot of people will ask, well, what was that particular moment? What was that exact thing where you were out? And we talk about seeds being planted. For him, it was a more traumatic experience. Specifically, he lost his son. His whole family was in the movement, and he lost his son. His son committed suicide. And it was after that, when he was taking care of his grandson, where he said, I'm not going to allow my grandchild to grow up in this. It is my fault of what my son had done. And I said, listen, it's not your fault. It's not, you didn't do that. He made those choices. He says, I know, but I brought him up in the movement, and I feel like that hate ate up at him on the inside. You know, he had other problems as well, but he felt like the movement and that hate and that anger was what set him on that course. And he took his whole family involved in it. A lot of us didn't bring our whole families in. And, you know, you think about, and I say this was going to be my good example, Anne, of a person that's gotten out, but it's a really tragic and sad story. But the silver lining here is now that he's taking care of his grandson and he wants to speak out, he wants to do things publicly. Maybe we'll be seeing him in a future one of these. But this was somebody that if I would have looked back into the movement, someone I knew him quite well, I would have never suspected somebody that deeply in that many years could change and get out. And of course you can say, well, Jeff, you did too after 27 years. Yes, but I assumed before I started doing this work that it would be a lot easier to get out people that were in their early 20s or just getting involved in the movement at those early stages because it wasn't as deeply embedded. But the reason for the story is no matter how deep this ideology is embedded, we can still reach people. We can still get them out. But like Daryl said, it's offering those different perspectives. And that's exactly what we do too, is getting those different ideas out there. Because a lot of times they'll contact, the initial contacts for me when I got out of the movement in early 2019, and I set up my personal website, was people asking questions. Are you Antifa? Are you a communist now? Are you working for the Jews? All these paranoias that they have in their heads. These are the questions they're asking. And at first I was getting agitated by it. I was like, why do they keep asking if I'm a communist? What have I said that would make anyone think that? And I had to bring myself back to that time and remember, you know what, Jeff, you would have thought that too about somebody that left the movement. And this is why we say it's very cult-like. It's a very cult-like environment, because when you're in there, that's your echo chamber. That's your bubble. That's everyone you know is literally involved in that bubble. That's the concept of Beyond Barriers, is there's these barriers in your mind. You've put them there. You've done it to yourself, but now you're in this bubble, echo chamber, or behind the barriers. You can't see beyond that. You can't see the humanity of the so-called other. You can't acknowledge that. You just don't see it. So when you sit down with someone like Daryl Davis or like T.M. Garrett or myself, and you're seeing that this is a human being sitting across from you, especially when it's somebody that you've been diametrically opposed to, like in the case of Daryl sitting down with active Klansmen, that's not a usual situation. That's why, as TM said, Daryl's an incredible human being, and we don't recommend what he does to the for the general public. Really, we don't recommend it. But it's a very unique way of doing things, and it's just making that connection. When you connect with the individual and they can start seeing it for themselves, as the other speakers mentioned today, they have to believe it. They have to see it. We can't make them believe what we're saying. We're not trying to convince them. I'm very delicate about how I work in that approach, where I don't tell somebody they're wrong. I don't try to force my beliefs on them. I say, well, what do you think about this? Or try handling something this way, or this worked for me. What do you think about this? Because usually what it starts with, at least before Beyond Barriers, it started with people just asking questions. Why did you leave? And that opens the door, I feel like, for conversation. If they're coming and wanting to know that, typically they're maybe questioning something in their own minds. They're thinking about changing. They're thinking about, why is this? Why is that? So you've got that opportunity. It's like cracking a door or a window open for someone to come through, and then now you're on their level. And with in the far right, at least, respect is very important. Respect is everything. So if you sit down with someone, and this is why they'll sit down with Daryl or Dia Khan or people like that, is because they've given them the respect. They've listened. Even if you listen and you're hearing the most horrendous, disgusting, or as Daryl said, like hate's a cancer, this cancerous ideology, you're listening to it, then when they're done speaking, you have the chance to talk, and they have to listen because it's a respect thing. So now you've got the floor and you can offer those perspectives and not say, hey, that what you said disgusted me, because then they shut off. They're going back into that corner. If you're open to dialogue, love conquers hate. I mean, just pure and simple. So if you're able to stomach their talk, there's an opportunity there. And that's where that silver lining is. And that's where that, window of opportunity is. And on your other one, and as far as someone that had went back, it does happen. TM mentioned it as well. Once someone's gone public, like what we've done publicly, there's no going back because the movement views you as a traitor. But a lot of them, most of them that are out, no one, you know, the general movement doesn't know, the public doesn't know. There's a lot of shame involved in this and admitting you're wrong, things like that. So most of the people that we're working with are not public. Those people have more of a opportunity to go back because they've not denounced the movement or things like that. So in another case I have, so this is a little good and a little negative, but another case, the guy got out and he told the people that were involved that his wife was Jewish. And I said, but your wife's not Jewish. Why did you say that? And he says, I said she was Jewish because I knew if I ever was tempted to go back, I self-sabotaged myself on the way out. So I couldn't go back because my wife is Jewish. So that was kind of funny. But another individual, as Ann mentioned, they're finding out that they really are Jewish or Native American or have these different bloodlines, that we really are all the same. We're all the human race. What does it matter what shade or color we are? So there was a guy, and this individual is public, so I can speak about him a little bit. Fred Cook. He was the former chief of staff of the National Socialist Movement, the organization that I was involved in, leading for 25 years. Fred was the chief of staff, which was second in command of the organization for a while. And he did a DNA test and found out that he was Jewish. And his whole family's in the process of converting to Judaism now. He works with us at Beyond Barriers. This is a case of a notorious Nazi leader that actually was Jewish, and then he found out his true roots. So there's all different kind of reasons people will leave these things, and I think I got a little long on my answer here, but those were a few quick cases that we've had and people working with.
And that's fine. Thank you. Daryl, we've had some comments from Roger, who does group work, and he's talking about how a 24-hour experience can really be transformative. And I know that you've set up all these meetings where you know, in a gentle and loving way, confronted Klansmen. And so you're a living example of how experiences can change people. But if you would just give some comments.
Glad to. Yeah, I want to dovetail on what Jeff was saying. You know, a couple things that, you know, he was called Antifa and a communist, and now what are you Jewish or something? You know, that those kinds of things do happen from detractors who just don't get it. And that's why it's so important to offer, rather than focus on attacking what they do get, focus on offering a variety of things, and maybe they will resonate with one of those perceptions, and then they will change their thinking. Just like, you know, he was called Antifa and a communist and, you know, Jew and whatever else, you know, that they considered to be attacking him, derogatory. I've been called a white supremacist before, yeah. And, you know, these guys know that. And, you know, when I got called a white supremacist, I mean, that battle was over. Forget it. You know, you can't even argue with somebody like that. So anyway, also another story that Jeff can elaborate on if he wants. I gave a lecture at NYU right before the pandemic. I mean, it was the last thing I did before everything got shut down. And I invited Jeff to come and be on my lecture stage with me and offer, you know, his perspectives, you know, after getting out of the NSM, et cetera. And in the audience was one of Jeff's former members himself. And he was Jeff's chief bodyguard. And this guy was a longtime member of the movement. He'd gotten out, and how he got out is an incredible story. He and I became friends as well. His father was in hospice, and the lady taking care, the hospice nurse, was a Black woman. And every time the guy would go home, you know, of course, he'd go to visit his father, and this Black woman was his hospice nurse, taking incredible care of this man, you know, just like a family member, like, you know, you protect your family. And here he is, a neo-Nazi, and seeing this Black woman take such great care of his dad, as though it was her dad. It really affected him and really touched him. And when he got out of the movement, he married that Black hospice nurse. This is a former neo-Nazi, you know, and Jeff introduced me to him. And I've seen some things like that before, but every time you see that, it blows your mind. It just blows your mind. And, you know, people are human beings. And these are the barriers that Jeff is talking about that we need to see beyond. And that's what his organization is all about. We create and self-impose these barriers, you know, and when the guy saw this humanity coming from a human being, not a Black woman, a human being who just happened to be Black. That's the difference. Let's not look at that person as a Black person, as a neo-Nazi, as a Jew, as a Muslim, as a transgender. They're a human being who just happens to be Jewish, happens to be Black, happens to be white, happens to be gay, happens to be whatever. Let's look at the humanity first, and that removes a lot of those barriers. You know, another thing, you know, professionally, I'm a musician, and trust me, I would much rather be on stage playing rock and roll and looking out on the dance floor and seeing people dance to my music than be at a Klan rally watching men and women in robes and hoods marching around a fiery cross and yelling white power and all that kind of stuff. But I feel that it's necessary for me to do that. And because I feel that our country can only become one of two things. One, it can become that which we sit back and see it become and watch it become, or two, that which we stand up and make it become. So we have to ask ourselves the question, do I want to sit back and see what my country becomes, or do I want to stand up and make it become what I want to see? So I've chosen that route. And two quick stories. Another one sort of like Jeff's there. As I said, I'm a musician. I had to play at a bat mitzvah and over in Crystal City, Virginia, which is right across the bridge from DC. And we're at the Crystal Gateway Marriott Hotel. And the people who were putting on this bat mitzvah had hired this klezmer band. Klezmer is like Jewish folk music. They wanted a traditional Jewish folk music, and they wanted some rock and roll. So, you know, I know the band leader, you know, he plays rock and roll, and I can play some klezmer tunes and whatever. So we got together, and I was sitting there waiting for my turn to come up and join the band and play some, you know, some rock and roll with the klezmer band. And this guy was sitting at a table with this lady, and he was just staring at me. And I didn't know why. I kept looking around to see if there was something behind me. It was nothing behind me. He was looking at me. And I didn't know what was up. And so when I got up and I went and played, he was like, you know, intently looking at me. I came back and sat down. He was still looking at me. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe he thinks he saw me play somewhere before, because I get a lot of that. Are you the guy who plays piano, blah, blah, blah? I get that out in public, you know, when I'm off stage. And I went to the restroom. And lo and behold, this guy follows me into the restroom, right? So something's up here, you know? So he's standing over near the door, not, you know, he's not at the urinal, he's not at the vanity, he's like watching me. And so I finish, I go to the vanity, I'm washing my hands, and then he's like looking down under the stalls to see if anybody's in there. Nobody was in there. And then he says, Daryl Davis. Oh, so the guy knows my name. So I said, hey, how you doing? And he said, do you remember me? I'm looking at the guy, and, you know, he looked a little bit familiar, but I couldn't place him. And I thought I saw him, you know, after I'm thinking about it, I thought I saw him at a Klan rally that I went to. You know, he had a robe and hood on and stuff, but he had that face because he had taken off his mask at one point. And I didn't want to ask him, you know, did I see you at a Klan rally? I mean, why would I say that at a bat mitzvah, right? And, you know, so anyway, you know, and then he says, he names this park where the Klan rally was. I said, oh my God, you know, it was him. And I said, man, what are you doing here? And now I calmed down, because now I realize, okay, I do know this guy, you know, he's seen me, blah, blah, blah. And I said, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm out. I quit the Klan. You know, I'm married now. I married a Jewish girl. And I said, you did? He said, yeah. He goes, you know, I want you to meet my wife. And I said, okay. He goes, but Daryl, please don't say anything about my past. She knows nothing about it. I said, okay, that's fine by me. And so I said, you know, I'll join you over there. So, you know, he went on back to his table. A few minutes later, I came over and I met his wife, his Jewish wife. You know, love conquers all. Whatever he saw in her transcended whatever he saw in the Klan. Like, as Jeff pointed out, as TM points out, love does conquer all. And I'm very happy for that guy. He chose not to reveal his past, to move on from it, and that's fine, and I respected that. There are those who want to come out and talk about it. I respect that as well. One last quick story, and you mentioned success stories. Here's one that is funny, but it's true. There's these things, you could not write a script like this. You watch reality shows on TV, a lot of those things are scripted, they're fake. But if you want to see reality, take a camera and follow Jeff Scoop around, follow TM Garrett around, follow me around. You'll see some crazy stuff that Hollywood could never even write, but it's true. Okay, so I had this exalted Cyclops in my car. An exalted Cyclops in the Klan means district leader. He's the head of a clavern, all right, which means, a group within a certain area, small area. And we're riding around, I'm driving, he's sitting over here in the passenger seat, and somehow we got on the topic of crime. And he made a statement. He said, well, all Black people are born with a gene that makes them violent. There's a lot of perception that Black people are very, very violent, And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, who's doing all the drive-bys and carjackings in Southeast? And he was referring to Southeast Washington, D.C., which is predominantly Black. There are some white people who live there. It is predominantly Black, and it is very high crime ridden. And I said, okay, it's Black people. I said, but that's what lives there. I said, who's doing all the crime in Bangor, Maine? White people, because that's what lives there. I said, you're not considering the demographics. And he says, oh, no, that has nothing to do with it. You all have this gene, you're born with it, you can't help it or whatever. And I looked at the guy, I said, look, man, I said, I'm as Black as anybody you've ever seen. I said, I have never done a carjacking or a drive-by. How do you explain that? This guy did not hesitate for 1 second. He had an answer for me like that. He said, your gene is latent. It hasn't come out yet. How do you argue with somebody who is that far out in left field? You can't even bite into that and chew on it, And so I was dumbfounded. I'm just sitting there driving, speechless. And he's sitting there all smug, like, you see, you got nothing to say. And so I thought about it. Okay, well, I can't bring him up to what I can prove. I have to go to where he is. And so I said, well, oh yeah, he had used the authority. He says, they say all Black people have a gene that makes them violent. The unknown authority known as they say, okay, people that you never see. So I had to use his authority. I said, well, they say that all white people have a gene within them that makes them a serial killer. And he says, well, how do you figure? I said, name me 3 Black serial killers. He couldn't do it. He couldn't even name me one. I said, here, I'm going to give you one. I named one for him. I said, here, just give me 2. He couldn't do it. So I said, Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Henry Lee Lucas, John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, David Berkowitz, son of Sam, Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler. I said, son, they're all white. You're a serial killer, man. And he says, Daryl, that's stupid. I said, well, duh. I said, you're right, it is stupid, but it's no more stupid for me to say that about you than what you said about me. And he got very, very quiet. And I could tell his wheels were, spinning real fast and thinking. And then he changed the subject. And within 5 months, I say 4 to 5 months, this guy quit the Klan based upon that stupid conversation that we had. And his Klan robe was the first robe that I ever got. So, that's a crazy story, but yet it is true. I could have given him a stack of books written by PhDs from the floor to my ceiling that told him, Black brains are no different than white brains or whatever. It wouldn't have fazed him. But I gave him some dumbass analogy about serial killers to compare that all Black people have a gene within them that makes them violent. I mean, he almost brought out my gene, but but anyway, that's a true story, and it was a successful story based upon meeting people where they are. That's not saying that he's stupid or dumb. No, Okay. But people only know what they know.
Yeah. And you spoke to him on his level.
Exactly.
Thank you, Daryl. I want to leave time for TM. And TM, I wish you would just say a few words, if you're willing to, about, do people need to separate themselves totally? I mean, because we are talking about humanizing people, and in a way then we are othering and saying you need to get away from all those other people. Although maybe for a time they do, maybe forever they do. And how it works, you know, you were telling me that some of your interventions are very intense, like they need you really strongly in the beginning. And we have 8 minutes left, so go ahead.
Okay, I want to chime in what Jeff said and Daryl said about Jeff, when people, when they don't want to contact you because they think, oh my God, is he a communist now, Antifa or whatever, or working with the Jews? Because this is the stuff we taught in that movement. So you can't get out, because if you get out, the only chance is you have to become exactly the opposite. Antifa, communist, you have to work with the Jews, you have to marry a black woman, you have to convert, you have to do all these things. Well, the secret is when you leave that movement, you all of a sudden have a choice. In that movement, the only choice you have is how to hate. You know, they put that the smallest common denominator is always the hate of whatever you're afraid of. Mostly the loss of losing something, and somebody's coming taking this away. So you start hating this. How you hate it, and this is why do you have so many different people in that movement? They believe different things, but the smallest common denominator is that hate towards the other. Well, you have the choice how to hate. When you get out, you have a much broader choice. You can be whoever you want to be. And I say that, well, if you want to be a communist, well, you can. If you want to become Antifa, you can. If you want to convert to Judaism, you can. I am right now. So you can. If you want to marry a black woman, like the gentleman, both Jeff and Daryl know, I know him too, marry a black woman, you can. But guess what? You don't have to. And this is the important part for these people to understand. You can do all these things. It's your choice. The beauty of a choice, the beauty of not having to live up to these expectations anymore, to these rules, how to do things. You don't have to do that anymore. Now, your question was a little bit a different one, I know. Disengaging from the group itself, like Exit Germany, Exit Sweden says it, you have to cut off all contacts. And at some point, you need to do that. And let's speak of experience, and that is myself. How it happened, and I have something in common there with Jeff. What we did both, we disengaged from our groups. We are both leaders of our groups, disengaged and handed the group over. We didn't dissolve the group. We didn't denounce the group at the time. We handed it over, retired. Retiring is safe. If you don't denounce the group, it's safe. You're not a traitor yet. And I was even hanging out with those people a little bit. I did it because it was pressure from the government. Germany puts their finger very tight on the problem of Nazis and racism and everything. They have very tight hate crime laws. So I was afraid to go to prison when I did that. But I was hanging around with those people, and it was fatal because that influence was still there. And at some point, it was still my fear to go to prison, because I was like, the authorities could think I'm still leading that group, just that the new person I appointed was a straw figure. And what I had to do at the point was cut off the ties. And at that point, I wasn't even reformed yet or de-radicalized. It was just the fear that I have to go to prison if I stay and something happens. I was still a racist. I was still an Islamophobe. I was still an anti-Semite at the time. But I knew that it's my only chance to get away, to move about 100 miles away and cut all contacts. And it was hard because it's your family. Often when you join, it's a group, it's a sense of belonging. Like those people with military background, for example. We haven't talked a lot about that. Somebody asked about that. And I think Jeff hasn't talked about it. Yes, the far-right movement and the white supremacist movement is recruiting military and the police for their experience, military experience, to train people. In my KKK group that I was leading overseas in Europe, we actively recruited police officers, active police officers. And one of them was the head of security. We had the internal, we called them the clavaliers, which was like the secret order within the security staff. And we had paramilitary like trainings that we were about to set up with stuff he could order from the police, with his police connections, with his training that he had. So this happens, definitely. But people who leave, for example, the military, that camaraderie then the military, all of a sudden they're gone, that is gone, and they fall into a vacuum. They don't know what to do. And those groups just offer you that new family, that camaraderie. And of course, including a cost, you can be the superhero defending your people against an overpowerful enemy. And that's what happened to me too, and to many other people. Together with a new family, and losing your ideology and that family, everything you believed in, like in Jeff's case, for 27 years. Another case, like Jeff said, 35 years and beyond. I was only in there for 17 years. That is scary. That is like a woman being in an abusive relationship. You know it's toxic, but you're afraid to get away because this new step into a new beginning, into a new life, moving to another town, finding new friends, finding a new job, maybe change your name, throwing over everything you believed in, your whole identity. And that is the hardest part, actually. That is the hardest part, finding that new family. And this is hard, actually, for organizations like ours, because some people are very attached at the beginning. They need to talk sometimes, not 1 hour therapist, and then you don't know what they do the rest of the week. No, they're contacting you like all day long. And people can become very needy. And it's very, very hard to keep that professional distance. It's like a doctor. You can't take work home, or a mortician. You see dead people. Once you start dreaming about it, it's over. And this is really, really hard. And then giving them a new perspective. And this is also why a lot of former white supremacists, how we call them, are involved in this work, but because often it gives them something to do. It gives them a meaningful way to give back. They do understand, they know what they have done wrong. And very often this is the first step. Hey, maybe speak out, maybe tell your story, maybe do something, help some research, do some things. So sometimes involve them in certain aspects of our organization. And I know Jeff does the same. That gives them a meaningful way to do things. And that's also what many people don't know, a whole network of formers. They know each other. We have meetings. We have online meetings. Sometimes there's even in-person meetings. And that gives you a little bit back, a family sense back. These are people just like you. They share the same background. They share the same news story. They don't judge you. The one says, I don't want to be a communist. Well, the other one might be a communist. And they still sit together at the bonfire and telling each other stories. And this is the great part, you know. But this is my answer to Anne's question, pretty much.
It's great. And I think all of us are frustrated because we'd like to hear so much more, but got so many comments both privately and publicly in the chat of these were 3 amazing speakers. Thank you to Jeff, Daryl, and TM for the work you do, for your bravery. Really, your courage, especially you, Daryl, going and meeting people, driving, with a Cyclops in your car and listening to that hate directed right at you. And Jeff, for being brave enough to hear all those terrible accusations and to answer people calmly and to love them through their change, and TM for your work. And we want to hear much, much more from you. And that's why we're beginning this research together, so that we can start to compile best practices and share them with others in a more organized way. And this was a little random, but super interesting. And I want to repeat what Daryl said, that each one of us has a role. Each one of us can do things. Daryl's a professional musician, and I want to hear you play sometime. You're gonna have to tell us where you play. And but in our private lives, we can make a difference. And so many people in this movement have told me that they came out, and Jeff came out in part because he spoke with Daryl, that a person from the group that they hated surprised them, made a different experience for them. And as Roger was saying, he makes these groups, and he said it on chat, experiences can really be a moment when you transform yourself. But anyway, we really pride ourselves on staying on time. So I'm just going to thank each one of you, and thank everyone that participated in the chat. Thank you for taking part, and we will do much more on this and come back to you in the future. So we'll end the meeting now. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you.